Is this thing on?
So, what will I be talking about today? First of all, welcome to whatever the hell this is. I'll be talking about things and stuff to start off with. It's like the middle of summer now. You can totally tell with like this cardigan and everything, but it's summer in the UK and I'm like in the middle of doing my masters and I just like finished all my coursework and like I have all this time to focus on my dissertation or my thesis. So naturally I decided to watch a lot of Netflix recently, and with all of these like the trash movies I've been watching, I've like started remembering all of these penguin related movies that have been released over the past few decades. I know there was like Happy Feet, there was Surf's Up, March of the Penguins. That wasn't animated, but shout out to Morgan Freeman, you're like the best narrator ever. But I feel like we often forget like one of the most OG movies out there. One of the most OG penguin movies in the 90s was The Pebble and the Penguin. That came out in 1995. And I'm not sure if many of you guys have heard of it, but it was one of my all-time favorite cartoons, and it still is. And it was directed by the legendary children's filmmaker Don Bluth. And you might be more familiar with his work like Land Before Time, the one with the rat, not the mouse, oh my god. The American Tail. If you've watched any of his movies, it's like his cartoons are an emotional roller coaster. And of course, like The Pebble and the Penguin is no exception. Sadly, though, it's been panned by critics. But we'll get to that later. So what's this movie about? It's based on like an actual mating ritual that takes place among the specific species of penguin in Antarctica. And what happens is basically male penguins try and find like the perfect pebble, so they use that pebble to propose to female penguins so that they become mates for life if the female penguin chooses to accept. I'm pretty sure it's not exactly what happens in nature, but that's like a pebble is somehow involved in mating in that like colony of penguins or whatever. The movie itself like focuses on a very hopeless, romantic, nerdy, wimpy little penguin named Hubie, and he's in love hopelessly with a little penguin named Marina. And like side note, all of the female penguins are animated really weirdly. I mean, in general the character design is really weird, but I'll get to that later. Where was I? Pause. This little penguin, Hubie, is hopelessly in love with Marina, but he's never spoken to her in his life until, of course, this clumsy little fella falls off a cliff. I mean, he stumbles, but the point is, he falls from a great height and nearly kills Marina with his body. Thankfully, though, they both survive. And Marina and Hubie finally get to talk for the first time. And this happens within like the first 5 minutes of the movie. So straight away, right after that like nearly fatal interaction, Marina and Hubie hit it off. Like at one point Hubie starts like singing about why he wonders about things and like why is the moon the way it is, and you can see how Marina starts to fall for him. Basically it's like homeboy can get it.
If homeboy is coming through with these,
right.
It's quiet. Yeah, no, It's quiet for him. But like if he comes through in like these, homeboy's gonna like get it.
So after he's done with his whole song, we cut to like a whole basically March of the Penguin scene with all like the male penguins running around the beach trying to find like the perfect pebble in time for the full moon mating ceremony, which is when they're supposed to present the pebble to the female penguins. Sadly though, our little Hubie, he's basically gets pushed around and bullied and he can't find the perfect pebble for Marina. And he gets really dejected about it, but he continues his search like well into the night after all of the other penguins basically found their pebbles. And he starts losing hope, but then he like decides to wish on a star to find like the best pebble. And literally moments later, Hubie almost gets killed again because the star literally becomes like a meteor and like almost hits him, but luckily Hubie like manages to escape, and like the meteorite just like lands a few meters away from him. So again, Hubie's life is spared, and he finds the meteorite and a perfectly cube shaped like green thing that's probably radioactive, let's be real. And Hubie is like, wow, this is the pebble for Marina. I found the perfect pebble. Thank you, stars, or whatever. So, yeah, he found his pebble to propose to Marina. But then we get introduced to our antagonist, voiced by the talented Tim Curry, who I will refer to as Tim Curry Penguin. Tim Curry Penguin is this jacked up like penguin. I'm pretty sure he's not a penguin. I don't know. He's very, very scary looking.
I want you to be my mate.
Drake.
Again, who is in charge of character design? I want to talk. But anyway, I swear I love this movie, guys. Tim Curry Penguin is also in love with Marina, and like the true fuckboy he wants to do every single thing he possibly can to win Marina's affections. Well, this is actually not really a fuckboy kind of thing, but he's more of like, I won't take no for an answer kind of guy. So he's the poster boy of rape culture, basically. So Tim Curry Penguin doesn't want any competition because he sees that Hubie and Marina are warming up to each other. So what does he do? Obviously, Tim Curry Penguin, being the classic kids movie villain, yeets Hubie off of a cliff in the middle of the Antarctic Ocean. So Hubie is swept away on an iceberg, and in the next scene he wakes up in a ship, and he finds out the ship is going to a zoo, and Hubie starts freaking out. He's like, oh my god, I have to go back to Antarctica in time for the full moon ceremony so I can propose to Marina. You know, my girl is back home, I need to be with her. So him and then another penguin who we're introduced to, named Rocco.
Come back here, you yellow-bellied landlubbers! I'll make them turn this truck around if I have to.
I'm pretty sure he's on steroids. Hubie and Rocco decide to break out of the ship and find their way back to Antarctica. But of course, like any dramatic animated movie, the day they break out of the ship, it happens to be when like one of the heaviest storms hits the ocean. So they black out as soon as they escape the ship, and they wake up on the shores of what seems like Hawaii or Bora Bora. Hubie is freaking out because he doesn't know how to get back to Antarctica. So he asks Rocco to help him, but Rocco is like reluctant. He's like, no, I want humans to feed me. But Hubie's like,
why? Oh my god, like please help me.
And Rocco starts like making fun of him and is like,
oh my god, you're such a hopeless romantic.
And Hubie starts like telling Rocco,
you must have some dream of yours that you want to chase too.
And then Rocco is like,
well, there is one thing, I've always wanted to fly.
And Hubie basically laughs at him after Rocco was literally vulnerable to him. So like, I don't know what Hubie's goal was here, but basically after a while Hubie lies to Rocco and tells him like,
oh yeah, I know a guy in Antarctica who actually learned how to fly.
A penguin, by the way. And of course Rocco is like,
oh damn, okay, then I'm gonna take you to Antarctica and like meet your penguin friend who can fly.
So Hubie and Rocco set out course for Antarctica. There is like a little bit of conflict when halfway through their journey, Hubie confessed to Rocco out of guilt that he lied to him and that there was no penguin he knew that learned how to fly. Naturally, Rocco was pissed for a whole 2 minutes and they were fighting. Well, it was a one-sided fight because Hubie didn't know how to fight. And he was strangling Hubie. Hubie was making a really weird noise and Rocco bursts out laughing. All is forgiven, and they continue their journey to Antarctica. And on the way, they meet a lot of obstacles, you know, become closer friends, and have like 2 near-death experiences, like one involving a sea lion or something, or no, a leopard seal, that's what it is. And another incredibly traumatic scene for me personally was scene with orca whales. Yeah, that scene scarred me as a child a lot. I remember like being really, really scared of orca whales after watching that, because it was such a standout scene, and also it was just really, really, really traumatic to watch when you're like 5 or 6 years old. So during that whole scene with the orca whales trying to murder them and eat them, Hubie sadly loses his pebble, and Rocco is presumed to be dead as well, because in the aftermath of the whole, chaos with the orca whales, the only thing that washes up on shore is Rocco's bandana. And of course Hubie is heartbroken, and he's like, oh shit, Rocco is gone. Of course, at this point they're already so close to home that Hubie can't, he has no other option but to just go back, So he goes back to Antarctica. Finally, he manages to find his way home. And just in time too, we cut to a scene with Tim Curry Penguin kidnapping Marina and carrying her down to his lair with the two of them alone. And as an adult rewatching that scene, knowing what that might imply, Hubie came in at the right time is all I'm gonna say. So Hubie comes in, he challenges Tim Curry to a fight. They go at it for a bit. That first round basically looks like one of those really shoddy videos you see on Twitter of like two people fighting in a parking lot, and one of them is probably on crack. That's what it was. Hubie was the crackhead and obviously gets knocked out in the first round, but luckily he gets back up and he knocks Tim Curry Penguin all the way down a chasm in his lair, and obviously he's presumed dead. So Marina and Hubie celebrate, and surprise, surprise, Rocco's alive, and they all celebrate for a bit. But then Tim Curry Penguin gets back up. And how does he get back up? He literally he emerges from below, from underneath the floor of their lair. The way his lair is constructed is so strange. I'm just wondering whether it's man-made or penguin-made or whatever, or is it a natural occurrence? What is Tim Curry Penguin? I just want to know. Anyway, the whole lair starts to collapse, and Tim Curry gets smashed by rubble and dies for real. And Marina and Hubie and Rocco are like, oh my god, how are we gonna escape this? We're gonna die too. But luckily, Rocco magically knows how to fly, and he's able to achieve his dream, and he flies Marina and Hubie to safety. And it was just in time too, because it was I think the day of the full moon festival. I'm not really sure, they don't really tie up that loose end, but when you're 6 and watching this, that's the least of your worries. But anyway, Hubie confesses his feelings to Marina. Marina of course feels the same way. And thankfully, Rocco found the pebble, so he gave Hubie the pebble that he used to propose to Marina. And of course, she accepted the pebble as well. Hubie was like, so do you love the pebble? And the line that gets to me every time, folks, is when she says,
I love it, Hubie. But it's not the pebble. It's the penguin.
And that's the point where I just cried my eyes out. Even as an adult, as a 27-year-old watching that, girl. And in the end, they have 8 babies, and Rocco teaches the babies how to fly. Tell me that's not a perfect ending. I just can't. Oh my god. The Pebble and the Penguin was banned by critics for the most part upon its initial release in 1995. And this is based on the few things I read on Wikipedia, basically, Roger Ebert's review and stuff, and a few others. But the general criticism was that it seemed unfinished, which I kind of agree to a certain extent when you look at the character design. Now the character design. I just want to ask, why do the penguins have fingers? And why do the female penguins have pencil slits? But specifically about the female penguins, they're drawn in ways that their legs don't really move. So the male penguins' legs are separate and they can walk like this, but the female penguins are their legs are together and they look like they're wearing pencil skirts, so they just like waddle like this. I mean, essentially all penguins should be waddling like that, but I don't know. I mean, as a kid, I didn't really pay attention to the aesthetics of this movie, but even as an adult watching this, yeah, there are, I have issues with some of the character designs, but I feel like where Don Bluth's movies excel at, regardless of, critical reception, are their ability to depict emotion in the general mood of a scene. And like this is done in visuals as well, usually in the background and like in terms of coloring and stuff, but also in terms of the soundtrack and like just the general structuring of the scene. And you can clearly see this in the scene with the orcas. I mean, as a kid I found it terrifying, but as an adult I also found it terrifying because I feel like the colors that he chose, the redness of the background, the darkness of the ocean water, it really perfectly depicted terror and despair for me. And that's something I also seen in other Don Bluth movies. There's this article, I think by One Perfect Shot, that's the website, about Don Bluth cartoons that perfectly explain what I'm trying to talk about here, about how his movies have a way of like not shying away from negative emotions, and you don't really see that in other children's movies, at least back in the 90s. And that's what I appreciate about Don Bluth movies in general, is that he doesn't patronize children's audiences. He treats child audiences as emotionally intelligent. He doesn't beat around the bush when it comes to negative emotions and themes surrounding death and like peril. So I appreciate that about Don Bluth movies, and that's definitely evident in The Pebble and the Penguin as well. There was also a lot of criticism about the soundtrack, and like I'm not sure who exactly said this, but one of the main criticisms of the soundtrack was that because it's a children's movie, there shouldn't be show tunes or something like that. And like, if you don't know, The Pebble and the Penguin soundtrack was composed, I think, by Barry Manilow, who is like the king of show tunes basically. He's also really well known for this song that a lot of like uncles and aunties sing at karaoke sessions.
Her name was Lola. She was a showgirl. Yeah.
And they were saying something along the lines of like, oh, why is a kids movie have like a full-on Broadway show tunes kind of soundtrack? It doesn't make sense. But like,
who's too young for Broadway? Like, what's wrong with that?
I loved the dramatics of the soundtrack as a kid. Now and Forever, Sometimes I Wonder, and Sometimes I Wonder reprise. Oof. Yo, the emotional roller coaster those songs took me on. Oh my god. Like, I'm sorry, but I don't understand why having a show tune-esque soundtrack is a bad idea. But anyway, to each their own. You're entitled to your wrong opinion, critics. But like, I do have like a few issues with this movie. Like, I know it's a children's movie, but I'm allowed to have standards. And like, one of the issues I have with this movie is how abrupt the pacing was, especially at the beginning, and in terms of like the depth of character relationships, specifically between Marina and Hubie. I feel like we get more screen time between... No, I don't feel. I know we get more screen time between Rocco and Hubie. And like, you get to see their friendship develop and like, them grow closer and closer throughout their journey home. But we don't see that between Marina and Hubie, who are supposed to be the two central characters throughout this entire film. So I just thought I'd insert myself again while editing. I thought of another potential argument. Well, one could argue this movie might not necessarily be about romance in a sense, and the focus could instead be on Hubie developing a platonic relationship with another male penguin. We also have to consider the fact that The Pebble and the Penguin is largely premised upon the idea of a mating ritual and like overarching epic themes of like romance and like love transcending geographical boundaries. So that's why I find a disconnect there, because there's so many themes surrounding romantic love and stuff. More attention was given to Rocco and Hubie's relationship than the relationship between Marina and Hubie. It's a bit weird to me that you only see them interact a little bit at the beginning, and right off the bat too. You kind of see Marina kind of falling for Hubie when he sings Sometimes I Wonder to her, but we don't really get to see why Hubie liked Marina so much. Why did he love her in the first place? I would have appreciated at least one or two flashback scenes of I don't know, maybe Hubie and Marina when they were little penguin chicks going to school, and Hubie maybe noticed something nice Marina did, either for him or for other penguins, something like that. Hire me, Don Bluth. I think overall, despite its obvious flaws and the fact that it was panned by critics, which doesn't make a difference to my opinion, I feel like The Pebble and the Penguin will always remain one of my favorite animated movies. Mostly because, there is an element of nostalgia involved in this. The soundtrack, the visuals, the voices, the dialogue, everything is going to invoke memories of my childhood. I own the VHS tape of it, for goodness sake, and at one point I think I memorized probably 80% of the entire dialogue. The Lion King, I know 100% of the dialogue, but Pebble and the Penguin was a close second. So it's always going to remain one of my most loved movies of all time. And do I care if critics think it's trash? No, because it holds a special place in my heart, and I'm sure for a lot of other kids who grew up in the 90s and the early 2000s. Would I tell you to watch it even if you're 30 or 20 something? Yeah, what do you have to lose? It's an hour. I think it's about an hour and 15 minutes. It's a pretty short movie, but I feel it's worth watching, just like any other Don Bluth movie. So I hope you've enjoyed whatever this is. If you've sat all the way through this, congratulations for getting this far and listening to my monotonous voice. But yeah, you want me to talk about anything else? Let me know. If not, I'm going to do another video anyway, if I want to. Who knows, right? This world is unpredictable, and so is this year. Bye.